Wow, I can't believe this. It's already November, and we're now already talking about December, just next month, and the year will be kaput, done, over and done with. Listen, we are live, and of course this is the Summit, a program that comes to you every Wednesday, live and direct from Rwanda Television. It's a big one because we actually scale the heights to bring you all the important people that would be able to talk about all the key issues that affect you and I, not just here in Rwanda, but across the African continent and sometimes even globally. My name, as always, is Eugene Anangwe. If you first time you're watching this show, we want to say thank you so much and welcome to the program. We are live, and of course tonight on the program we'll be having a very good conversation, and of course that conversation is going to be revolving around what we call citizen-centric governance, and we'll be trying to observe the Rwandan model. And of course, before we get into that, there is something that happened this week, and of course that was the release of the Rwanda Governance Scorecard, and I want us to just take a look a bit about this particular scorecard right here. And of course what we know is that Rwanda has actually made steady progress in all of the areas assessed by the Governance Scorecard. The country's overall score has actually increased by around 7.5 points over the past years. Of course, we'll be trying to look into the details of that specific number right there. Of course, also, what we also know from this particular scorecard is that the safety and security pillar remains one of the highest performing pillars. We'll try to understand why that particular pillar is, performing that way. Of course, all this is in the effort of Rwanda, pushing itself to be able to do what we call citizen-centric governance. 4 of the 8 pillars measured in this year's report, they actually reported a slight improvement, with safety and security leading in the performance with a score of a whooping 93.63%. Of course, what else do we know about this particular scorecard? We know that Rwanda has tried to make this particular progress in improving the rule of law and protecting political rights and civil liberties of its citizens. On the program tonight, we have a very amazing person who will be sharing with us some of the insights from a civil society perspective. Thank you so much, Delphine. Let me try and introduce all the guests right here on the show, just to be able to understand what this particular scorecard means, and of course, from where you sit back at home, what do you make of it? And of course, the model for Rwanda when it comes to citizen-centric leadership, and where you are watching us from any part of the world. What does citizen-centric governance mean, and how do you be able to measure that? That's what we'll be looking at right here on this particular program. Right now with me in the program, not the first time on the show, a good friend of the program, Dr. Yusta Kaitesi, Chief Executive Officer, Rwanda Governance Board. Thank you so much for making time. Big day for the board actually this week with the release of the governance scorecard. We'll be talking more a bit about that also on the program. Another person who's not new to the program is none other than Ozoni Ojielo, who's the UN Resident Coordinator for Rwanda. Thank you for making time one more time.
Thank you.
Of course, Dr. Joseph on the summit. Not so new, because I read one of your tweets last week, and you were doing a very interesting calculation of the food prices lately.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us on the program. Dr. Joseph is actually Executive Director of the Never Again Rwanda, and also the Chairperson of the Rwanda Civil Society platform. Thank you for making time on the program. I want us to just go into the conversation today, and I'll start with you, Dr. Yusta. This scorecard, of course, when we're talking about citizen-centric governance, from what I've read is that it is supposed to be able to measure the performance of the different pillars within government in delivering for the citizens. Tell us a bit more about it, because at the end of the day, there are people probably would be watching it and say, these people, they set their own exam and mark their own exam. How? So just talk to us a bit about the modalities, the intrigues behind the scenes, how this scorecard actually comes to be.
Well, thank you very much, Eugene. The Rwanda Governance Scorecard is an implementation tool of the nation's strategic choice of holding ourselves accountable. And the government of this country has chosen to hold itself accountable in the interest of delivering on citizen-centric governance. And how do we come up with the governance scorecard is the question we raised. And it starts from the citizen-centric part of it. So our sources of data are primary sources, initially, especially with the service delivery satisfaction,
Yeah.
because that's where we measure the citizen and bring in the voice of the citizens. Every year we go to the countryside across all the 30 districts and ask a reasonable percentage of our population
Yeah.
on how much they appreciate governance and service delivery.
Yeah.
And that data produces an independent report
Yeah.
called the Citizen Report Card, but which report really contributes a lot in the measuring of the governance scorecard. But it resonates from the planning of this country as well. When you look at the National Strategy for Transformation,
Yeah.
we already know that by 2024, we want our citizens to be satisfied with service delivery at 90%. And the citizens have now said how much they are satisfied with that in a particular way. The second part is, as I said, we have a National Strategy for Transformation that implements our governance and development ambitions, which is the Vision 2050.
Yeah.
And through that strategy and sector strategies as well, we have particular targets. So the way that we measure ourselves is we collect data on how we are performing. Institutions will provide to us data on how they are performing, and we measure their data against the target of where they should have been that particular year. So I continue to give the example of the judiciary. The judiciary had an ambition of reducing case backlogs by 13% by 2023. But this year, when they provided us the data, they were still at 55%. And when you take 55% against the 13% that was a target, of course you get a 22%, which is a low performance.
Correct.
But it's a low performance against the target. And the last part of our sources of data is also reports from other, indices from other places and other institutions. When we can try to understand their methodology, we also look at how much they are gauging Rwanda and what they produce. So that is what the governance scorecard
is all about. Right. We'll be coming back to that. I want to hear from Ojello Ozonia. I want to understand from where you sit. Of course, Rwanda, just like many other countries, are signatories of international, treaties, and including the UN and all. What Rwanda is doing here today, based on this model, from where you sit, how impactful would such, models of self-assessment in giving to the citizens, the services they need in terms of the citizen-centric governance structure. What would you be able to say from a person looking from outside, yet inside?
That's how else will those in government know that they are responding to the needs and aspirations of the people if you don't have a metrics around which you measure your performance? So what happens is that you have global metrics. You have many institutions, some multilateral, some individual, that have also established their own metrics. I think the unique thing about the Rwanda Governance Scorecard is that it's taking both the global metrics, including the metrics around how you measure SDGs and the performance, metrics from a number of global and regional comparators. Take the Ibrahim Index of African Governance, for example, Rule of Law Index, Visa Openness Index. There are about 8 regional and global indexes that Rwanda Governance Board has adopted, appropriated them, and then merge them with local metrics that's based on the National Strategy for Transformation. When the CEO talks about the targets that are based on the NST, and so you set benchmarks on meeting those targets. So you take the SDG, you take the global comparators, you take the national framework, and you create a composite framework for how you measure performance. I think that's wonderful. That's best practice. The second point I would like to make is that measuring governance, people should not see this as a beauty contest. It's not about showing how ugly or poor the performance of the institutions are. It's actually a tool for an improving performance. So the mirror is not to say you look ugly. The mirror is to say this is where you are in terms of your aspirations about where you want to go. And therefore, what do you need to do?
To improve.
To improve, to get there. So I think that's a second powerful message. The third, of course, is that this is the 10th year that the Rwanda Governance Board is doing this. So it's gotten better every year. It's perfected its tools and its methodologies. So it's become a reference point. So if you're looking for how to report on the performance of institutions, you have a national mechanism, as in the scorecard, as a basis for you to measure performance with a view to improving performance of institutions.
Interesting. I know the tweet is, this should not be seen as a beauty contest.
That's right, yeah.
It is actually as a mirror to show you where you are and how to improve. Dr. Joseph, I want to ask you this, because you wear several hats. Of course, the journalist in you, once one, always one. And I think one day come sit on this side and sit in for me on the summit. And then you have the civil society space that you're within. In other models, people would argue and say the civil society is actually supposed to be playing the oversight role, and it should be the one actually coming up with these indices, not the RGB, Rwanda Governance Board. It should be the civil society. Talk to me a bit about that notion based on the model that we see here in Rwanda of government self-assessing, based on, the benchmarks that are created for the citizen delivery tools.
No, thanks a lot, Anangwe. What I can say is that at times governance is not one shoe fits all. So each and every government has to have a way of running government, and also a way how to make sure that there are systems in place, irrespective of the fact that principles of governance are universal. But because of the context, the history, culture, so you find that each and every country has its own way of how they want to achieve the desired, or what they would love to see. So I would say that even in those societies where it's non-state actors or the civil society that do the assessments, they come from a history that their governments had something in place. But over some time, and after those organizations or civil society organizations or non-state actors, after building capacity, because we can't assess the government if we ourselves, we don't have that capacity. So we need to prove that we have that capacity so that we can be able to do those assessments. So,
but let me just park that for a moment. It's been 10 years. This is the 10th edition. For 10 years, civil society hasn't built capacity, or they're taking the building and keeping the capacity. What's going on here?
No, we've done a lot of things, and we are still doing so many things. I hope in the next 3 years. Of course.
You need 3 more years.
Yesterday during the launch, I joked with the Secretary General that in the next 2 years, I think it should be with civil society assessing.
Also,
but that shows you that we've already built that capacity. And also, you see, when you talk of government, government, it's you, it's me, it's her. Government is not separate from the entire population. It's all of us. So, but in order for civil society to be able to assess some of the government programs, it requires professionalism. It requires skills. It also requires resources. So those societies where civil society do that, they've had time to achieve those capacities. And I would say that also here in Rwanda, there are some programs, government programs that we assess at different institutional levels, but not at the national level. So I think in some few years,
we should be seeing a scorecard analyzing the scorecard that has come. But I want to understand from you, CEO, even as you bring in the point you want to also bring, just probably add on this to your answer. I want us to debunk or probably, deflate some of the criticism or, other perceptions that probably these reports or these scorecards are aimed at positioning Rwanda as, you know, doing so well, especially for those who criticize or who look at the country and say, I mean, this is 95%, 85%. I just want you to just take some time and be able to, you know, sieve through the myths and the facts based on those kind of perceptions.
Well, I don't know where the perception came from that everyone else loves Rwandans more than Rwandans. And I think that's what goes wrong in terms of governance generally. Because governance is about managing yourself as a people. And that is exactly what is also wrong. The assumption that we are doing this for an external view. It's not a performance. We are not performing for anyone. This is about us. We have chosen a governance system that has intentionally, that has developed intentional approaches to how we do things. One, we clearly have an ambition of pursuing our unity. And the only way you pursue your unity as a people is when you check and cross-check whether what you're doing is staying the course. And that's what we are doing. You know, when you cannot measure it, when you cannot assess it, you don't know whether you're doing the right thing. That is a very internal mechanism in itself. We have agreed as a people in our vision. You know, when we had the vision 2020, when you look at the vision in 2050, we want a transformed life. It's about the Rwanda we want. And the Rwanda we want is the life we want to experience as a people. And because of that, we know we can only achieve that by being efficient, by being accountable, by being transparent, by allowing all of us to participate. Now, if we are doing participation for the sake of others, then we probably have a second life. But I think the biggest life we have is the one we are living in this country. We live on this continent, we belong here. And I wanted to come back to that, to the question of probably the next 3 years we'll see civil society doing that. It's not a competition either. You know, I think we don't have as much assessments, as much accountability tools as we should have. I wish every village, and we do that, we want, the process is every village should have umuhigo. And if you do have umuhigo at a village level, you should be able to assess whether if you are doing the right thing, if you're meeting the targets. And therefore, I don't think even, I wish each civil society that we had, professionally, were going to be able to do the assessment of what they do. Dr. Joseph knows we have been engaging with the civil society platform and the network for international NGO to initially also self-assess. We produced the civil society barometer. I wish they start even with that. Because we have understood from a government perspective exactly the analogy of a mirror that he has used. We all love our mirrors. And the reason we love our mirrors is they tell us before anybody else tells us. It's a reflection of how you look before you go out. When other people look at us and they say, can you do something on your teeth? You do it with a lot of embarrassment. And I don't know why people think that we, the people who get embarrassed because we didn't look in our mirrors at home, are not the same people who come in governance and would have wished to look into our mirrors and be sure that you're doing the same thing. So even when I want to assure the civil society that the space for transparency and accountability is wide. Whether we continue doing a governance scorecard or not, whether we remodel it into something else, I wish we could be able to have a governance scorecard each quarter.
But
and I'm not able to do
capacity.
that.
He says capacity is missing.
I think, you know, I wish I had brought the first scorecard and the current scorecard. I have them both in my office. The first scorecard, it's a scorecard in the real periods. The current scorecard has emerged over time. And I know the civil society does a lot of things separately. I wish that the civil society platform could afford at some point to do, I think capacity comes with practice. But as long as you have clear lines, you have clear standards, capacity is a progress. And I think the civil society is also, because the global platform is changing anyway.
Correct.
So even the grown civil society has to redesign. There was a time where it seemed as if there was a competition between government and civil society, but when you look at SDG 17, it's partnership for the goals. And therefore, the perspective of appearing as though we are in any form of competition in governing and in development is taking a different tone.
Yeah.
We all remain accountable to one another. So I should probably say that nobody should assume that the governance scorecard is about government only. The civil society is assessed, the private sector is assessed, and government is assessed. So it's a tool, a mirror through which we all look at ourselves, including those in the private sector and the civil society.
Yeah. I am very safe in this room. We have the UN here. Before I go to the UN to probably quell anything that could seem like maybe you know, a contest in terms of their thoughts, and I agree with this kind of thinking process. Dr. Joseph says we can do it, but we need time. It is a process. Dr. Joseph, Dr. Eustace here says that it has to start somewhere. For me, I want to understand, because for the sake of that person who's watching and says, we would love to also hear from others. It's good we've been having this barometer, I mean, this scorecard for the last 10 years. But we also want to hear other voices. What are they saying? Are they agreeing? Are they disagreeing? And that voice we want to hear from the civil society. She says it's a process, but it has to start. What's taking too long, Dr. Joseph?
Yeah, you're bringing in something very interesting because one of the elements of good governance is to have diversity of ideas.
Ideas, opinions, yes.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we are human beings. When you read this, you want to read something else, to compare notes, to also see what so and so is saying about what you've either performed or what you've so. But what I can also say is that irrespective of the report card, civil society also do assess policies.
Absolutely.
Education policy, agriculture, the decentralization policy, and we give reports of some of the shortcomings in these policies.
Absolutely.
And government work towards improving and also even changing some of these policies. So because at the end of the day, the governance scorecard also builds on those policies. So civil society has contributed in one way or another towards the governance scorecard.
Yeah.
Because as she was saying that some of the sources come from reports that have also been done by the civil society organizations. So as she said, capacity is
a process.
It's a process. So, and also, yeah, we need also to build trust. As you might be knowing the history of civil society across Africa, they've always been in competition with the government. So if you are competing with somebody, so how is somebody going to trust what you're presenting? So we also have to work towards building that trust and also contributing to the national vision. So that no one thinks that civil society is there to just look at what is not working, but also contributing
to improving the state of affairs. Interesting. And Ozonia, I want to ask you this, because as a development partner, for instance, you know, looking at these efforts, and we've heard that it should not be a competition, but an effort to complement and improve for the sake of the citizens, not for the sake of we did it better than you or you did not do it better. What are the frameworks? What are the, you know, plug-in areas for support for both, you know, civil society, private sector players, government institutions, in actually remodeling or even making this performance indicator from the way they're assessed in even how the performance is done to improve citizen benefits from them? What are the plug-in areas that probably the civil society can say, okay, we can be able to plug into this form of support, or government plugs into that form of support? What are they?
I think the first point is to say that you don't go and change something just because somebody wants duality. If it's working, why change it? I would actually say that perhaps one of the reasons why civil society hasn't felt it necessary to produce a parallel report is because increasingly you will find that the governance scorecard is very robust. So if it is robust, the methodology is robust. You look at the collection of evidence across board, from primary data, going to the field, speaking to citizens and having their perceptions on the function, the effective. You look at the indicators are quite robust as well on all of the 8 key pillars. Then you look at secondary data. Secondary data includes published material reports, which will include reports from civil society, from development partners, from international partners, from books that are written. So you add all of that, you get a composite picture, the aggregate of what the performance of the institution is. So that's one. The second is that in governance in Rwanda, there are many platforms of interaction. So even if civil society has not produced its own governance scorecard, the platforms of interaction are spaces for airing of views on the effectiveness of the various governance architectures and mechanisms that are working. In the context of development cooperation, for example, we have 14 joint sector working groups. That is government, it is civil society, it is private sector, it's research centers. And it's at the highest levels. The counterpart chair is the permanent secretary of the respective ministry for that sector. And the co-chair is a development partner, bilateral, multilateral, that is a lead institution. And they have their own monthly dialogues. There's a sector plan. And then we do annual development partners retreat. So in the context of the sector dialogues, what's working, what's not working, annual retreats of the sector working groups that is chaired usually by the minister for the respective sector, and all the partners are working in that sector. It's a strategic platform for conversation about what's working, what's not working. So I think what Dr. Joseph said is it has to be a strategic engagement that looks at the national aspiration and how all actors are part of it. That doesn't mean that you're asking civil society, everybody to be compliant, stand in line one after another. No. Civil society groups play different roles. Some are very strong in campaigning, and they should please continue to campaign. Some are strong in advocacy, so they want to go to the streets, they want to raise placards, they want to draw attention to the issues because they want immediacy. That's a legitimate form of engagement. Some want to engage in research, they do the analytics, they present the evidence. Some want to engage in policy dialogue. Each of these platforms is legitimate and effective, and they're points of conversation. So if civil society engages mostly at the strategic level in terms of the policy conversation, the sector working group conversations, that's a positive because there's no polarization between government and civil society in terms of what the strategic agenda is. And if colleagues think at some point that they need to publish a composite report, why not? They should do that. We have many internal UN processes where civil society publishes a parallel report. So if you look at the parallel report, like the report of civil society that goes maybe to the Human Rights Council, or the report, civil society presentation at CSW, government publishes the National Voluntary Report on SDG performance. It's not every year. Usually in a 4-year period, a country is expected to report once at the high-level forum on sustainable development. And it's a very inclusive, very consultative process. You take the VNR report about SDG progress, you take the governance scorecard, you're going to see a lot of correlations in terms of what is happening. So my sense is that the scorecard has become very robust. People trust the credibility of the methodology and the data collection process, so then it becomes a reference point. So it then, yesterday when we had the launch, people ask some critical questions. And like, your methodology, and the other interesting thing, let me conclude on that point. The scorecard also published the assessment from some international assessment reports in the same booklet. So this is what the governance scorecard says. This is what the Ibrahim Index of Governance says. This is what the rule of law index. So you begin to ask, okay, some scores here is high, and is low on that side. What accounts for that?
Yeah.
So you see a transparency and a robustness in the approach that is adopted that allows an open conversation.
Right.
So it's not, I don't think it's the matter of should there be a civil society report or not. Is this report robust?
Yeah.
Is the methodology valid that civil society and other actors can use it in their strategic engagement with government counterparts?
Interesting. And you bring up a point that I want to ask Dr. Yusta here on the aspect of what next? The numbers are out. We know the pillars that are performing well. We also have where we have seen some drop in performance. Then what?
Well, there's more than one then. One then is make the reports known. Tell the institutions how they stand. Tell the public how we stand. But every chapter of the of the Rwanda governance scorecard ends with recommendations. Every presentation of the Rwanda governance scorecard ends with recommendation. Every part of the next scorecard has a part that speaks about how the institutions implemented the previous recommendations. And one of the next parts is how do you interpret how you stand? So for example, how do we interpret the status of the challenge? How do we inform the solution? Some of the proposed recommendations are not solutions in themselves, but they provoke those who are in those particular sectors
to think about
to think about what is the challenge? How can we do different? What are we struggling with? You know, yesterday somebody asked me and said, why is service delivery lagging behind for that long?
Yes.
And I said, well, I must say that when we started assessing service delivery, we didn't even have standards for service delivery. We didn't even realize that before we are talking of a delivery form, we should speak about a delivery culture. So the next phase is, how do we create a service delivery culture? These are the standards. We want institutions to integrate the standards, customize them, and be able to apply them. I just gave an example of one of the pillars, but I guess that's what we all should be doing. We are going to the next phase of planning. We should be asking ourselves, when we set 90% for satisfaction, was that a very ambitious setting? Why are we at 70 or
we should have even set 100%.
Why are we at 75%? And that's 75% not of 100. It's 75% of 90. So if you put it to 100, if you put it on the normal 100, it becomes even a little bit less because the target was less than 100. So the interrogation of, even yesterday in the launch, the interrogation on, are we setting actual ambitious targets? But even before we set actual ambitious targets, how better do we set the targets in a way that is transformative? Because in the end, really, this is not about numbers, this is not about targets, it's about the transformation of the lives of the citizens that we are serving. And so the bigger question is, are we doing, and the reason we assess is that we don't want to wait forever. We've had external assessments. When we started off as a country, we subscribed to the peer learning mechanism of the African peer review mechanism. And that was nice, but that takes too long. The last one we had was 2006. And we don't
we want to move.
Yeah, we don't have so much resources to not be sure that we are doing the right thing. So also these assessments really help us to understand whether the direction we have chosen to deliver through is the right direction, or if we need to adjust the methods and how we do it. So the what next are also on methods, not methods of the RGS only, but methods of delivery. How do we set better targets? But also how do we interrogate what is not happening the way we want it.
Interesting. Dr. Joseph, I want to come to you. On this one, what should happen next? Should we have a scenario where there's either a carrot or a stick for the pillars and those in charge of those sectors or government institutions, so that it is not just seen as an annual event where numbers are churned and we go back home and it's business as usual? What should be the scenario of the so what or what next?
Yeah, no, one thing, what I can say that yesterday, I think the CEO also noticed that the turn-up was very high. All senior government officials, institutions, heads of institutions. The good, to me, my analysis is that when this report comes out, the institutions are eager to see where they stand.
Where they stand, yes.
So that if there is improvement, so that means the bar has been set very high. How do they maintain that? If maybe due to some reasons, like for example, last year we were coming out of COVID.
Yes.
So COVID affected and challenged some of the systems.
Yes.
So if there are some areas that were underscored, it gives people responsibility to at least sit and go beyond these numbers to try and find out what needs to be done, so that the city, because governance, the governance that this country has chosen is citizen-centered. So it needs to be governance that is delivering services to the citizens. So now there's a need for both government institutions, private sector, and also civil society to see, to analyze what do these numbers say. What needs more, where there is need, how can we be able to work with government institutions to make sure that we address some of those gaps, and we see prosperity, we see citizens coming out of poverty.
I want to read comments or feedback from those who are watching us, and I want to thank you all so far for the insights that you're sharing right here. But before we do that, I think I understand the King and Queen are actually just neighboring Kenya, and they might have come with the London chilly weather, and I want us to work on the AC. Can we just switch off the AC so that we can be able to have some warmth in the room? Right. So there's feedback coming through, and all you need to do is just go onto our social media platforms, and the X platform, we are right there, and the hashtag to use as always is the Summit RW. So just talk to us over there, and we'll be able to share your thoughts right here on the show. We're also live on our other platforms like YouTube, so just go onto our YouTube live stream that is on right now. It's also on my latest X or tweet right there. Just go onto the comment or chat section, leave your comment right there. I have Cyrus Ngusi who's saying that mere good governance is not enough. It has to be pro-people and proactive. Good governance is putting people at the center of government processes. Kudos, RGB. Many, many thanks. And this question brings me to the area where you identified, or the scorecard identified for improvement. And of course, some of those areas include the area of participation and inclusiveness pillar, which is relatively low in this year's report. The pillar recording a high decrease of around 3.03% compared to other pillars. And I want to understand, what does the report say, what does the scorecard say caused this? And what are the recommendations, just briefly, on how best this can be done? And then I'll come back to the other panelists on how this, if status quo remains, how would it affect citizen-centric delivery for the government?
Well, thank you very much. If I remember very well, the part that comes a bit down, we also took it into areas of governance and leadership. And for example, when you look at the executives of the private sector federation in terms of gender inclusion, that brought it a little bit low. We have always looked at gender inclusion from government, from parliament, but in the end, these principles are not just for government. They are principles in our constitution, and therefore they should progressively replicate themselves in all the sectors. And I know we looked at the percentages of gender participation in the civil society, in the judiciary, and in the private sector. It gets interesting sometimes if you interrogate certain things. When you look at the number of women in the leadership of the courts, it's quite impressive. But when you go into the commercial courts, the numbers go down. When you go to the vice mayors, that is the red flag of it. The mayors, the numbers have been at least 30%, a little bit above 30%. The vice mayors for social are above 80% women. And for economic, is less than 20 women. That also is a bit of a bias in terms of development.
Yeah.
And the assumption that women do very well social and they do not very well development,
Yes.
which is economic, I think is an assumption that we should challenge. Our areas of development have things to improve on, and maybe also challenging women to improve in that direction is important. I'm saying that because there are certain things you say and you ask, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Why do we think women don't do well in the commercial courts?
Yeah.
And why do we think women are not very good at as vice mayors for economic development? And yet that is the bigger target.
Yeah.
The bigger target is not for us to stay into dealing with social protection. The bigger target is to create wealth and have no poverty initially by 2030. And therefore, I do appreciate the approaches that are happening for inclusive growth, inclusive development, the social protection initiatives. But I think the bigger part of creating wealth from a developmental angle, we should be at the local government level. I know at the national level the challenge is great.
Yeah.
If you look at the parastatals as well, I mean the government institutions other than cabinet, central government, the leadership of women is still actually not as high as well, which is part of participation. So there are a few areas of participation that I think could be looked at, but the bigger picture of participation is great.
Right.
Yeah.
The PSF, private sector, from an executive perspective, they used to have a male chairperson. Today they have a female chairperson. They'll be arguing and say, but we think we are trying, but we are being pointed out there as not really doing so much.
They are doing an amazing job. Actually, you know, I think in partnership with UNDP, they have introduced the gender seal.
Correct.
There's a lot of initiatives, and I think that's what is beautiful here is it becomes a culture. Everyone starts to see it as a correct thing to do. And therefore, we don't highlight things because if you look at the most improved indicator, it is also one of the indicators that need the most improvement. So the steps it took for improvement were great, but the level at which we want to be is still wanting. So it doesn't mean that when you are the most improved, you are also, we've gotten where we're going. So indeed, the private sector are more conscious about gender inclusion. They have introduced the gender sales.
But
I should appreciate actually, in terms of promoting women's rights, the extent at which the private sector have introduced early childhood development centers, because that's empowering for the women that are still in their reproductive age to not compromise between their intention to have children and the opportunity to grow professionally. So congratulations for the many initiatives that the private sector is doing, but I guess they can do better.
They can do better. Dr. Joseph, from where you sit, looking at those areas that have been pointed out for improvement, we've definitely looked at that. But then also there's a decline in ratings of access to information and accountability of public officials. This coming at a time when there is even an access to information law, where now the journalists are hurt. Tell me what you feel about this, and what can civil society do from where you sit and other players to change this narrative?
No, what I can say that I think there's still some work that needs to be done, most especially when it comes to creating awareness, so that the government officials who get the opportunity of getting into government offices,
Yeah.
And should understand the necessity
Yeah.
of providing these information, because in order to achieve good governance, you need informed citizens.
Correct.
So to have informed citizens, they need to have access to the information. Yeah, because you see, the role of a citizen is to respect law and order, to participate in governance if he or she is appointed, and also to pay income and other taxes. So if you don't provide the information, the citizens might not understand why it's essential to pay taxes honestly. So I think there is still some work that needs to be done to engage public servants occupying these government offices, that please provide information so that your work becomes very simple. But because we are coming from a history where people have misused information, where people have assassinated people's character, so they decided to hide that information so that, some people
Past
have
experiences.
still, some people still have some trauma. So we need to keep reminding them and also working with them so that they understand the necessity of providing that information, because it doesn't make sense to have misinformed citizens, because the policies won't address the realities on the ground if people are not informed. So I think civil society, the media, we need to be out there engaging so that people can understand that no one is interested in destroying their career, but we are contributing to the big picture.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes to go, and we want to hear from you. I always say it's the shortest 1 hour.
Yes, really.
So from those analysis or from those thoughts on the areas that need improvement, I want to hear from your thought process. What more do you think should be done?
First of all, let me come back to the comment by your questioner.
Excuse me.
Because one of the great value add of a scorecard like this, there are 3 dimensions that I see. So one of them is actually as an accountability platform. The recognition that those who sit in public offices are using taxpayers' money. There's a fiduciary relationship. There's a trust on the basis of which they act. So they need to account to the public in whose names they're acting. So this is the baseline for measuring the quality of the accountability. That's number 1. Number 2 is that the scorecard helps to give you a sense of the social legitimacy of the institutions. Our citizens appreciating the quality of their service, the interaction, the inclusion, the participation. So if your social legitimacy is weak, then you know there's a gap. So whether it's lack of access to information or many other structural factors you need to address. The third and most important, then it's about, it actually is a foundation for how you measure the social contract in a society. The social contract is, yes, as Dr. Joseph said, you pay taxes, you give up certain of your rights to the state that then acts on your behalf and provides services, goods to you. Now, if the state fails in that, it means the quality of the social contract is weak. So when you have robust, high numbers, it means that the social contract is very good. So what do we need to improve? What we need to improve is in the interaction between the citizen and the governing. People will not eat indicators. They will not eat the scorecard. People will feel it in their pocket. They will feel it in their communities. So the scorecard is just a barometer on the basis of which you translate the state resources, the state programs to the benefit of the citizens. So the more people see that reflected in their pockets, the more they see that reflected in the quality of their lives, in their interaction with their neighbors, then the social contract is strong, and state officials are making, not just state, even private sector, civil society, making the best use of. It's a means to an end, and that end is quality life, transformation of the social lives of people, transformation of the society, a dynamic relationship between the governing and the governed, and social harmony and reconciliation.
Yeah, and that's why I'd asked earlier on. So what do we do after all these numbers are out? And probably from you, Dr. Euster, in the sense of ensuring that the barometer or the scorecard is serving its purpose, what next? Now that it is out, what are the next things that we should be seeing taking place, or what would you wish to see happening from the involved players? Because Dr. Joseph said the room was packed. Sometimes maybe for them to just come and hear. And then when they go, what should they do?
So when they go, I know what they do first. First, they usually want to understand exactly. Whether it's a positive change or a negative change or a settlement, they want to understand what changed, what happened. And second, I find a lot of commitment in institutions on what to do. Today we released our annual report that includes also the citizen report card. And one of the mayors wrote to me and said, I am dead. And I said, no, you're not dead, but you have to improve. And the desire to understand in terms of leadership, it's like collecting your customers' satisfaction. It should be really understood. Just that people know historically government doesn't collect their customers' perception and satisfaction. And I think we are delivering on a governance method that is citizen-centric. And therefore, both the citizens should be able to demand more, to highlight what's not happening right, but also those who are duty bearers are also having the opportunity to be told where things are going right and where things can be improved. And those are some of the parts of next. We interrogate, we engage, we disseminate, we interpret, and sometimes we get recommendations for the new parts of the scorecard.
But then
I see that coming.
This decline is what I want to also to share a bit more about on the issue of accountability of public officials. And if indeed they are to be citizen-centric, yet they are not being accountable to them through providing information, what should be done moving forward? Well,
two things. It's an obligation. So for the duty bearers, it's an obligation. For the information seekers, and I challenge the journalists sometimes, I tell them I also work on information. So how do you do it differently that you find so much the stress of not getting the information? So on the other side, we should also speak to the journalistic team, the journalistic core on how do we do it that affects the trust. I think somewhere Joseph said the trust.
The trust issue.
What are the issues that are between those who are seeking information and those who are providing information? It must be knowledge-based as well. People fear the media. I sometimes realize also the media fear the media, It's a space that people don't just bounce into in any way. But we have to demystify that. The media is a space for the voice of the people, for information. We've had moments of depending on the media and knowing that we can only do better with them. So for those who are supposed to be providing information, they should know there is a duty to do that according to the law. But for the journalistic profession, they should also assess and evaluate their professionalism. Now this data comes from the media barometer. And the interesting part, the journalists are the ones who said there is limited access to information, but also they have said that their professional growth is very down. So if you compare the information that people say, we as a profession are not growing well, we are not professional enough, and those who we want information from are not providing it well, I think there's something that should be done on the duty bearers, but certainly there's something that should be done on the journalist part for professional conduct in that regard.
I can hear the sound. It's telling me, Anango, it's time to leave. I always say it's one of the shortest hours that we always have, but I know that we need to continue this conversation. And at least we just started it, and we need to build up on it, especially on the civil society voice, of course, the development partners' perspective, but also what more needs to be done beyond just churning out these numbers. So I want to thank all of you for making time. And of course, to you who's been watching the program, thank you very much for being a part of the summit. We'll be back on Wednesday, 9 p.m. Please don't miss. If this is your first time to watch the program, catch us every Wednesday, 9 p.m. right here on Rwanda Television. As always, my name is Eugene Anangwe. Goodbye and good night.